I'm kind of like I think people like my because I'm kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
I love
You just see how games of possession is more intense, how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to all of a sudden win.
Hello, and welcome to Nothing But Respect. We have a full, very good episode with former Golden State Warrior David Lee. Just kidding, it's a different David Lee coming up. Really like that conversation. But before we get into it, I wanted to talk to you, Harry, about a new project that you dropped last week, The Tranche.
Yes.
Very, very excited to have been able to listen to that. Can you explain what it is?
Yes, thank you. The short answer is it is a kind of like literary magazine for chat podcasts. I commissioned these 5 podcast episodes from 5 different groups of people, thinkers and writers, etc., and kind of just went to each set and was like, I think you're interested. Like, I think you could do a good conversation about this. I think you do whatever, and recorded them, spruced them up a little bit, and then we are selling that on this platform called Meta Label for $5. That's the kind of short version. The slightly longer version is like, I've been working in podcast, the podcast world since 2018, and there are, Defector is a great example of like of a model that does work, this kind of collective model, but like that's few and far between. Like most of the podcast models, like underlying economic models, have like not really worked. Then there's like lots of venture money that comes in, and then like, oh, Gimlet runs out of money and quietly disappears, or Pineapple quietly disappears, or Barstool gets works such that it can be the weird way a gambling company can integrate into media. It's say even the Ringer, which is successful in a lot of ways, is buoyed by Spotify, so the model is just tricky, and the model that does work is often going at it alone, which is something I'd prefer not to do. I like doing this podcast because it's collaborative and we get to make something fun, but those avenues are few and far between. So that's the intellectual underpinning behind the Tranche, is I'm trying to figure out what's a new model. What does it look like? Can we get people paid a little bit more in a way that isn't also not in a charity way, but just in a way of can we tweak the model such that it makes more sense? And paying $5, $1 an episode for what I think are very thoughtful pieces of content felt like a good middle ground.
Just balls and strikes here. I'm not biased. You and I talked about this project months and months ago, and I was like, I got other stuff going on, but this looks awesome. $5 is a crazy steal for what you're getting. I've listened to 2 of the 5 so far. And what's very striking to me is how different they are from each other. The magazine comp is so right. One episode is just Min Tran is conducting this investigation through a series of interviews and following where this initial question takes him, and it goes to some amazing places. And then the other one I've listened to about the Argisa PSYOP, chaotic good sort of history of payola. That was the culture journalist people just doing this great investigation with history and stuff. And my brain felt like the audio version of reading a magazine or something. And I really think you were very successful in the sort of different approaches that you're able to bring to it.
Thank you. Yes, I also like how different they are, and there's also we've got some familiar faces for the NBR universe. Eamon Whalen has a really, really good piece with Naomi Zeigner about the history of the word based, from kind of Lil B to Pete Hegseth. So that's what I was. Yeah, exactly. Kind of that was what I was going for about the I really admire literary magazines, with the big exception that I don't read. So this was sort of my my attempt to find a middle ground.
Well, yeah. That comparison, another way that comparison works is so much of podcasting now is just kind of stupid. Like,
Right.
you know, we've talked about how player podcasts are ascendant, and like that formula maps onto just culture and everything generally, where like all the growth area in podcasting is just like celebrities asking people for like, what's a weird opinion you have?
Yes.
And I found it refreshing to have like such like sort of intellectually ambitious stuff happening in an audio format, you know?
Yes, totally. Cause those chat podcasts that take themselves intellectually serious are my favorite shows, because like it just mirrors a medium that I really enjoy, the kind of relaxed conversation. But then I also get to like fucking learn about the world in a way that is cool. And there's just there's less of that than I think there should be. So I was trying to do my part. So yeah, go purchase the tranches on available on Meta Label, which is a website that is sort of broadly in line with this. The other thing that's worth saying is like the way the money works is that when you purchase the tranche, that $5 gets like automatically distributed across the contributors of the tranche. So there's a kind of collaborative profit sharing component to all of this, which is you know, the Defector fans will appreciate. So yeah. And then while we have you here, if you Nothing but Respect has continued to grow. So if you're new here or newish here, welcome. Continue to tell your friends about this show. Give us rate and review. We have the tip line, the Broke Jumper tip line. Hit us. It's in the show notes. You can call and leave us. We got a great one.
Got a really good one.
Yeah, that I'll read. We'll talk about at some point, and or shoot us an email, and yeah. We'll see
thank you for listening. Enjoy David. He's great.
Ahead to Martin, to the rim. And the Sacramento Kings have won. What a thriller at Arco Arena.
Hello and welcome to another very special episode of Nothing But Respect. My name is Harry Krinsky. I'm joined by Patrick Redford, and we have David Lee on the show. And how this came together is, you know, Nothing But Respect podcast. We've got some league sources, right? We're talking to people who work at teams, and one of our league sources, we were texting about clavicular, actually, as it were. We were talking about how he's using all kinds of crazy language, like looks maxing and you know, whatever else insane stuff. And our NBA source was like, you know what? You know who else is using all kinds of crazy words? These new 20-something basketball draft analyst Zoomers that are kind of like the next guard of NBA and WNBA and college basketball analysis. And one of those people that he brought up was David Lee. So we wanted to kind of like, we are, as you will find out, we are completely chopped. And we need you to kind of like walk us through what the kids are doing. So David, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, what's up, guys? And honestly, you might have got the wrong Zoomer, because I'm not. I would say like this is a funny thing. Like we had mentioned, like, you know, I started the collective. We do the article thing, and I told all the guys, love them to death, but I was like, I don't want any of that verbiage on there for the exact reason you said, which is like, you know, where the colloquial sense of those words are. But I do think like a lot of the verbiage that some of my counterparts and some of the people who have joined me in the collective, like Niall, Finn, they are introducing new ways to sort of conceptualize things that is very interpretable to younger audiences, which I think is it's a great thing and it's a net positive thing. But I just like, when we write the articles, probably no one wanted it in there just because, like, you know, we want to be professional. But I think that it's really interesting to me how the language has changed as like evaluators have gotten younger and new concepts are being invented. But yeah, I'm not the one who be saying stuff like that for real.
First type shit. I really like how sort of how boundary breaking a lot of this language stuff is, because it really like, it makes me feel like I'm encountering information in new ways. And like, I was just wondering why do you think like draft stuff, and the draft in particular, is so liable to have people invent new ways to describe like shoulder flexation or whatever, or like why all these new compound words are being invented around the draft?
Yeah. Well, I think that in some ways the draft can turn into like a dick measuring contest, where it's like everyone wants to prove that they are either finding a new edge or that they're correct. And so sometimes that can manifest in trying to conceptualize a new way. And I think that's where you get like the new verbiage. But I also do think it is in some ways like a pretentious outing as well, where it's like you're trying to impose your intellectual will or superiority because you want to say why your methodology is right or correct. So I think that's part of it for sure. And that's why you see like the average draft Twitter person is like their vocabulary is probably going to be like well above what you would expect from someone who was just tweeting. But I think that's more of it. But I do think it's the same thing where it's like some of these concepts are legitimately complex. Right. Like,
yes.
Like I'm not saying this like I'm up on the soapbox preaching. I do the same thing. Like I think when I was describing a prospect preseason, I said he had a Macropterus wingspan, which is like, have I ever said that word in my life? No, but I felt like, if you have a 7'6" wingspan and you're 6'8", then that's the apt type of sort of adjective that you should use to describe that. And it also sounds cool and it makes me sound smart. So like, why
Absolutely. Not? I mean, I should be clear too. Like I like this stuff. I want writers, especially draft writers, to be as boundary pushing with language as possible. And my sort of theory on this is that like the draft is kind of this like it's exercise in projection and translation, and there's just so much like unknowable there. And so I feel like it's sort of worth defining the known terms as like precisely as possible, even if that precision does lend itself to, again, basically the creation of new concepts heretofore unseen.
Yeah. I think that's correct. And I think you for what it's worth, that makes sense that you sit at this intersection of, crazy ass Zoomer lingo and then like a kind of more, I don't know if conservative is exactly the right word, but like regular style talking. Because I was looking at the Fit Factor, and you have this new like test that you can test to like break down your draft philosophy. So you can like take these, you said, I think now there's going to be 20 questions by the time this comes out, and like it'll tell you what your draft philosophy. First of all, just pausing, even the idea of a draft philosophy is kind of an interesting thing worth digging into. But one of the things I liked about your, it puts you on this chart, and the chart on the one hand is very simple and it's also very complicated in that like it's sort of high ceiling, high floor, like steady versus high potential upside on one side, and then like data blog boy versus eye test on the other. But then within that, which are like, those are simple, kind of generally understand, so people understand concepts. But then within that, you've got like two-way believer Moriball disciple or like eye test loyalist and all this stuff. So it's like it's a good fusion of the combos. But can you talk for a second about draft philosophy as a even just like overarching concept?
Yeah, so I love the political tests, like the spectrums where you can see where where you may lie, and that's kind of where I initially thought that'd be really interesting. And then Steph No, who's like he's been doing great work about basketball for a long time. We ended up doing a podcast after a Hawks game, so I started that relationship there. And then I came across a quiz he had did in 2020, which was the same style. But I came to him and I was like, hey, I would love to reproduce this, but let me anchor it in some data, because that's just the type of guy I am. Like, I don't want to sit here and manually tune everything. I want to be able to say, I know what type of stats correlate with certain philosophies or tenets of prospect evaluation. So that's where that came from. And to me, like the idea of the philosophical spread of like the public evaluator is really important to me, because I think that there's almost an ownership you have as someone who speaks about the draft publicly to, I think in my opinion, like to have good faith discourse and not mislead people. But also like your goal shouldn't be, in my opinion at least, your goal shouldn't be to change people's minds, but to present information in a way that allows them to come to their own conclusions. And I also thought this was a really interesting way to look at like potential biases or like blind spots you may have in the draft evaluation, because everyone has bias. Like for me, for example, I have like certain guys who I built opinions on very early in the cycle, like Nate Ament, Michael Brown, Chris Sinak, Tunde Yesufu. Now, was I right by the end of the cycle? Yes. And that happens relatively often, but there's also times where I'm wrong and I can't let go of my anchoring bias because I want to prove myself. I want to be right, So it's like, I think I wanted it to be, as much as it's like a fun exercise, I wanted to be like this is how you, based on what you think about basketball in general, this is how you should view these prospects. And I thought that it was an interesting way that maybe you can expose some of that blindness that you may have for yourself. And then for the philosophies themselves on the site, so the 4 like pillars of the square, I guess, that's kind of like the general like star upside, and like two-way fit is like there's 2 concepts. It's like you're either drafting for peak, in my opinion, or like wins above replacement, which is more historical or like over a player's career. And so do you value the peaks more or like a steady valley kind of? And then the eye test and the analytics is more so like the evaluation style. And then the 6 different philosophies sit in different positions. And I grouped like Captain Ahab is like an upside hunter, like, chasing the white whale at all costs. Like you'll throw your life away if it meant you can get like this, like a shiny Pokemon. And then the eye test loyalist has some shades of that as well. It's a separate philosophy, but typically those who adhere to the eye test probably looking more so for upside because that's more transferable, shots. And then like spreadsheet FC is just it's a callback to like how people refer to analytics communities on Twitter. So that's mainly that one. But then the two-way believer in the Morey ball, like Daryl Morey, Sixers GM, of course he has that reputation as being very analytically driven. But those are 2 also separate philosophies because someone who's like very heavily into Morey ball may not care as much about defense, but the tenets of switchability and positional like coverages are still pretty pervasive there. And then like risk averse is more of a general philosophy, and I've found that that's probably where most people end up. And I think that's interesting too. So like after I get all the submissions from this cycle, I then want to do like an article about like philosophy overall with all the questions. And then you had mentioned a little bit earlier, Harry, like I'm doing an updated version, hopefully tonight or tomorrow, that has more questions. And those questions are also like, I wanted to think of ones that aren't explicitly related to the draft, but they still can't carry like draft implications. So like one of them, for example, is like, do you believe that Jalen Brunson was the best player on the Knicks championship run? And like, that may not be something that you would think has anything to do with the draft, but it certainly has a lot to do with how you view the game and how you view team building, because there's arguments in either way. But it really just comes down to your philosophy.
I just love how something as certain as like numbers on like production numbers and like basketball as you see it can be so subjectively defined. And I'm wondering, have you taken the quiz? Like where did you end up?
Yeah. I think mine was like risk adverse, but when I expanded it, it was like closer to like the analytically driven. And I think that because I have like a very like X's and O's view of the game in addition to the stats, like that's why I kind of like sit in the middle, as opposed to, of course there's some guys that I'll start just with the data and then I'll go to the film, or I'll start with the film and I'll go with the data, or maybe I might just do, it depends. But I was definitely more so in the middle.
Harry, did you take it?
I did, and I was in the eye test, kind of bucket getter, high upside eye test guy section. And I what about you, Patrick? Where'd you end up?
I was Captain Ahab eye test loyalist, which I think like my draft philosophy. Exactly. Yeah. Like I will read so many scouting reports. I will watch at least like half an hour of YouTube video on all these guys, but then I basically sort them into one of 2 buckets, which is like good or ass. And my evaluation is there's no data that goes into it. And I feel like I'm wrong about as often as people who do sort of more work. And so I think because it's so unknowable, I find myself intimidated by your job, basically. Like, making a big board, which I do want to get into your big board specifically. And the thing I like about it is how different it is from consensus, but like, you can just tell how many evaluators are like looking at the ESPN mock draft and sort of just using that as a rubric. And I wonder, like, is it sort of difficult? I mean, is it difficult to make these evaluations like in a vacuum, like sort of untainted by biases?
Yeah,
because there's so much info out there,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and that's why like. So, I mean, not everyone, but when I've gone on these podcasts, people ask me about my board, and I've updated since February. So it's like, but because I've watched so much and I did so much before the season started and throughout the season, really hasn't changed much. I just like I've been so focused on everything else I want to do on the site that like the big board has kind of been just in my head. But definitely. I mean, there's a sheer amount like what you were just talking about, like getting fully invested. Like there's just a sheer amount of work at like the parsing through hundreds of and sometimes thousands of prospects to figure out where to put them. That's intimidating, and that's kind of like why I wanted to build the Fit Factor, because during the season it functioned as like a watch list. So like here were the best games of the season, here were the worst. Here's how they performed throughout the season, and then like now as the site's maturing and I'm adding more features, and I wanted to be like a one stop. Like here is their entire progression through college. Here's their archetypes. Here's how they performed in this context, that context, this context, and then what does it say about their NBA translation? So like I want to simplify the access to the data, but also just like make it just easier for people to what you were mentioning, Patrick, was like making it just easier to get involved in the draft, because I love it. Doesn't mean everyone has to love it, you know. And the NBA doesn't make it easy for people to get fully invested because the season ends and we're right into the draft, and that's just the nature of the league calendar. But like sometimes I wish there was just a little bit more time so people could get fully enveloped. But I mean, it's tomorrow, so
Yeah.
Well, something about the like draft philosophy and the way, even just the way that you are incorporating the notion of eye test as part of the data analytics is a really fun, like, 10 years ago is a really fun like synthesis of what we're talking about. Because 10 years ago, the understanding of the data nerd was that they like don't like basketball. They like are watching it on a spreadsheet. They're like not consuming the actual kind of heart and soul of it. But I just feel like you're injecting a kind of human element to all of this with maybe your philosophy is this sort of ineffable quality of being able to like watch somebody play and be like, oh, he moves different, or like he's light on his feet or whatever. And kind of combining the woo-woo of the eye test, as it were, with hard data. I really like. One other thing I wanted to say is on the in keeping with this, as you make maybe a third round of the philosophy chart, you could consider just throwing in like, what's your favorite TV show? Or like it's been a long day at work and you get home and you sit on the couch and you look outside and there's a dog playing. How do you feel? And then like that's just like that is like involved in there. So it's just something to consider.
No, it's funny because I was just telling my roommate, I was like, I feel like you could tell a lot about a person like by their relationship with food, and like, but like in terms of like how much you love, like you like enjoying preparing food. Some people just eat for sustenance. Some people do it for passion. Some people, all these other things. So it's like I get what you say. I know you was joking, but I like that's actually like like I was an industrial engineering major, like very STEM heavy, but I wish that, at my school that we had more time to do, like, I only had one psychology class, or I only had like 2 or 3 electives, but like those are the things that really interest me as well. So I want to anchor the data as much in the human element, because the thing is, like defense, for example, I wanted to derive defense as much as possible, and it just didn't work because at the college level, it could be a little bit sparse. They pay so few games, and so I had to go through with Steph, and we tuned it up, and we was like, this is where we injected our understanding of these guys. Like, for example, Jaden Quaintance didn't play much, but like he's the best defender in the class, in my opinion. So like I had to account for that. So I mean, even with as much as I wanted to derive everything in the test itself, there's the eye test components, but then in the underlying weights too, like you had to go in there and account for the things that we can't evaluate with defense with numbers entirely just yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious, like you are approaching this with such like mathematical rigor, but do you find yourself like gravitating towards certain player types, or like over indexing more from consensus for certain things? Like, for example, I consider it a big sign of personal growth that I believe you about Nate Ament, because like 6'10" lanky guys who kind of suck are like, I love those. Just give me all of those, like just bad Kevin Durant clones. I know Harry is like, you like water bugs, right?
Yes. If you can kind of like smoothly maneuver a pick and roll, I'm like, oh yeah, dude, give me that. Like, I'm like, A-Cuff should go too. Should be Darren Peterson and then A-Cuff.
Yeah, but David, do you have any player types that you like find yourself like sort of irrationally attached to?
Yeah, I think this was something I realized when I was looking back at the 2024 class, when I was like in 2023 as well. Like, I really like Leonard Miller. I love Thomas Sorber. I love Colin Murray Boyles. I love Mogbo, Jarris Walker, and like all of those guys are like kind of all the same type of guy, which is kind of a big with wing skills. And it's also like why I like Boozer so much, because he's a big with wing skills, and more than anything, like those guys were applying physicality, and that's where like I think my favorite archetype is. And like I still believe in Leonard Miller, and like if I was running a team, then I would take a flyer on him, because I think like just what he did, Ignite was like horrible context for everyone, right? And then just I like tools, not in like a vacuum, but in terms of guys that like I think have obviously if they're applying them, but like, I think there's a difference between like saying I like Leonard Miller because of his tools, and like I like AJ DeBonsa because of his tools, because they're not like holistically applied, if that makes sense. Like Leonard Miller is playing to his size and above it on both ends as a prospect. AJ DeBonsa was playing to his size to a massive amount offensively, and then defensively he wasn't. And like those are the things that I feel like are less teachable or like developable in a prospect. So definitely like those guys in that Thomas Sorber, Colin Murray Boyles, Boozer like type of guys. Like I love that archetype.
See, I look at Leonard. I watched him play in garbage time last year against the Kings, and I watched him play, and I thought that guy runs weird. You can't build around a guy who runs like that. But I remember really liking him coming into the draft as well. I do want to get into your big board at some point soon, but like something I that you mentioned that I found to be very like important to hit on. Like you notice this with a lot of other, like the most serious draft evaluators, where it's like they're not just basing, their evaluations off this one season of college basketball. Like they're going back and like looking at guys over the course of their careers. Like how long have you been sort of tracking some of these like top guys? And like how much do you index on their one season of college versus the other ones, like the other rest of their career?
That's a data gap thing. That's one thing where it's like I just didn't have access years prior, and I really still didn't. If like if it wasn't for some people I knew who were able to get me some things, but like that's like a big frustration for me. Like if I could like equitable access to data like infuriates me. Like I feel like everyone, because the thing is like the biggest draft analysts are making takes or presenting information that's unverifiable by 99% of the population, and then it's not that it's bad faith, but it's just more so like the NBA owns the data. The NBA should like I think the NFL is a lot better with the way that they deal with their data. I think the MLB is way better, but like the NBA has like all these different partnerships. They took away some of the really interesting things they were doing with AWS, like in 2024. Like they had like a bunch of like passing tracking stuff, like with front court paint touches, and that was like just available for free on the NBA site. And then they ended up their data provider had an issue, so it's not like the NBA's fault. Like that was an issue, but it's like they haven't been working back to get to that. And then they finally got the gravity stat and some of the other stuff they introduced back this year. But all that to say, like pre-college data is really hard to come by. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, wait. So I'm curious. Are there people who are like, "Yo, I got Darren Peterson's plus minus data tranche. I'll sell you for $10." Like, is there like a black market of high school data?
I mean, the thing is even that like I just said that college basketball data is like pretty sparse. High school data is even worse. I mean, I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been Caleb Wilson. Like he had like some ridiculous like data tracking issues. Even like if you have synergy, like there are gaps there where like certain like Kingston Flemings, for example, he didn't play on the Adidas or Nike circuits in AAU. He was on Puma, and so like the data tracking there is super super shoddy. Like it's very hit and miss. So it's like depending on what level a guy played at, what high school they played at, whether when they were a 5-star and when they weren't. Like I ended up finding like Keaton Wagler's high school stats on like a random site that was like reporting on, I forget if he's from Illinois, I forgot where he's from. Yeah. But wherever he's from, like they reported on it. And that was the only place I was able to find it. And it wasn't even on Synergy. So it's things like that where it's like, I want to use it as much as possible, but it's like, you really can't. But this year I was able to get like some pre-NBA stuff, and definitely was a big factor for me. Like guys like Boozer, for example, everyone looks at him, he's a plotting big, can't jump, he sucks. But in his high school years, like very high transition frequency player, he was a lot slimmer. He played more on the perimeter, and he bulked up for Duke because they wanted to play in the post. So the fact that he can do that and exist in those two different like paradigms is really attractive to me. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't, understand what the pre-NBA data was telling me. And Caleb Wilson, pretty similar. Like, he was really efficient in high school if he played next to Cam Boozer, and he wasn't. If he wasn't next to Cam Boozer, and he played for a large part of his AAU seasons with Cam, so it's like you got to do a couple stuff like that. And then Michael Brown was super inefficient entirety of high school, but it's because he grew 6 inches at, like, I think when he was a sophomore or junior. So, like, you know, when you're a kid, you got to get used to growing into your body. And so, I mean, he shot like 35% from 2 or something ridiculous, but it's because his first couple seasons he was diminutive, and then he shot up and he's still getting used to his frame. And you see that in the way he plays with, like, his decision making or some of the shots that he takes, where it's just like he's still getting used to his new body. So I think, like, those are all good examples of different guys. Sinak as well. Like, Sinak, I was able to watch some of his high school stuff, and he was not playing like a big man. He's playing more like Patrick was saying, like a KD clone. And that's how he started his career at Houston. And then he kind of morphed more into being a big man. So it's like I had that understanding of his game because I was able to look at some of the high school stuff and then contextualize what he was doing in Houston because of what he did in high school, and then know what I wanted to see from him at Houston because of what he did in high school. So I always feel like you got to start wherever you can. And like in Atlanta, we got Overtime Elite. So I went to see some of those guys play. And like there's some guys like Goosby's going to Texas. They got a bunch of guys over there. So that was my being able to watch them before I think is big.
That's like super fascinating. And now I'm wondering if there's like, I'm just imagining NBA teams developing this sort of like spy network of middle school scouts and stuff who are like hand tracking some of the best like 8th graders performances and then putting them into these like synergy style like play tracking models.
They do.
Like that's just so cool to imagine.
Yeah. Al Harrington shot really bad his freshman year, but he was going through, Al Harrington Jr., but he was going through a terrible breakup. His head was in the clouds.
My name is Justin Ellis. I'm the projects editor at Defector, which basically means I help all our podcasts make their way into the world. I'm also the author of a new book coming out. It's called The Cruelty of Nice Folks. It's about going back home to Minneapolis after George Floyd was murdered by police to understand why the world was so bewildered that something like that could happen in a place many people associate with progressive politics and a high quality of life. To answer that question, I had to dig into the city's history and examine its big promises of equality and opportunity, and the ideas that created a status quo that segregated homes and schools but went unquestioned because of the myth of the liberal ally. It's also a personal story of how Black families like my own survived and thrived in spite of all of this. The Cruelty of Nice Folks arrives on June 16th. Consider buying it from your favorite local bookshop or wherever you buy things online ethically. And hey, thank you for supporting Defector.
Two things I wanted to touch on what you just said. One, does that, because something that doesn't gets brought up in fits and starts, but is really this kind of like pervasive thing is the kind of shoe wars of it all. And that there's like, that being with Nike can afford you certain things, being Adidas, et cetera. Does that, you just touch on one with the like Puma, if you are with Puma and not invited to these top 100 camps, you're just like getting less tracking data, which as I'm pitching this forward could legitimately lead a team to be like, well, we have less data on him, so we're less sure of him, so we're going to draft him lower. Like that's a great, is that too far of a jump to go, or are you seeing stuff like that? No,
it's like that. Like, Kingston Flemings and Wagler are going to go probably top 10.
Yeah.
But both of those guys were nowhere near one-on-done radars because they played at such small programs. Like no one knew, or Corey as well, Buco Corey out of Stanford. All of those guys played on very low-level circuits, if they played on a circuit at all. And they weren't from these bigger cities that have more scout coverage. And it takes them having historic freshman seasons and they're all on their own right to fight for their right to be top 25. But players like Michael Brown, who have been in front of scouts for a decade, kind of, not to say he didn't deserve his ranking, but like Flemings was a top 15 player and he still wasn't considered a one and done because he played on the Puma circuit and because he went to a team like Houston, where Houston, they don't play freshmen. So it's all context. It's all contextual to me. And it wasn't, but when you look at Wagler shot 44% from 3 on like 400 attempts in high school. He shot like 83 or 84% from the line on, again, like about 300, 400 attempts. So the signs were there. He's going to be that level shooter. And there's always signs of like these. It's not like these guys come out of nowhere, but it's just there's so many players. They're all over. It's very sparsely distributed, and so I think like that's where, for sure, the data, like if the data was present, then I think you'd see less examples like that of guys slipping through the cracks. And then, but that's how you get draft steals, and that's the fun part about it.
Yeah, the other fun part is, we're talking about like how do we develop sort of omnipresent data models to track the nation's best 7-year-olds, but then you also get guys who are like after March Madness mocked in the second round who end up getting picked in like the top 12, and they get these like just meteoric rises at the last second. So as we sort of move into the big board, I have a sort of broader sort of philosophical question, which is like, as sort of scouting and data become, if not better, like more enmeshed, do you think that the draft is becoming like more certain as these things go? Like, how do you sort of feel about the evolution of the draft's like level of mystery as the years have gone on?
Yeah, I think it's definitely gotten like that margin has gotten closer. And I think what's so interesting to me is like, as I've tried to, make connections in the NBA world as much as possible, I've got like the understanding that almost every team has a model, and almost every team's going to have a model that's going to be pretty much saying likely the same things if they're not indexing for the team's fit. And so I think there's a very clear understanding like what makes a good NBA player, but it's about what makes a good player in your context and what makes this player better in your context than everywhere else. I think that's more of the nuanced sort of value. Like everyone knows not to say that everyone knows what a good player is, because that's not true at all. We see teams take bad players all the time. I mean, but it's the justification of like the investment time or like how you envision their trajectory. You could take a bad player and defend it with good process if you believe that your developmental system is strong enough to build that player into something that makes sense in your context, right? Like if the Brooklyn Nets take Nate Ament, there's no defense. But if let's say the Bucks take Nate Ament, I also feel like there's no defense, but maybe they can tell themselves, okay, the player developmental staff, we can build his body like we did with Giannis. That would be delusional to me because obviously he's not Giannis, but maybe it's anchored in a little bit more reality as opposed to the Nets, which is like, hey, we want a tall 6'10" guy. So that's where I kind of think about it, whereas it's not about what makes a good player. It's about what makes a good player in your context. And how can you find a player you value higher than everyone else too? Because, you don't want to, like, I think the Hawks, for example, they should be valuing like Flemings and a Daimara at 8 above anyone else because they make the most sense in their context, in my opinion, in that range. But they could probably make an argument for Wagler or other guys like that. So that's kind of how I stand on it. We should have less uncertainty though, for sure. I mean, with the amount of data that we have, and I think you'll see guys deviate from the model or even what their scout room is telling them plenty of times. I feel very confident like Brooklyn's scouts did not want them to take all 5 picks and then also take those 5 players that they did. I seriously doubt that. But, sometimes there's someone else who's making the decisions. And Sean Marks probably anchored that in the process, in the decision-making process that made sense to him. And hopefully that was communicated to everyone else. But my process doesn't lead to that, but his process might. And so I think it's all about the process more than the results, because in the draft, you have such little control over what guys end up turning out to be. It's more about, how repeatable the process is, how defensible it is. I don't know how he would defend himself, but maybe.
I love the idea of James Wiseman as the last bust. It's like we got the data so good that Wiseman, he's just the last bust. We now get it.
And that was another guy who had like a big gap, and we didn't know what he was because he broke his foot. So
I mean, give me 10 minutes with him, I would have told you not to draft him. But Warriors didn't listen to me.
It's funny. Maybe I think my experience as a Sacramento Kings fan has scarred me in some ways, where I'm like, you gotta take big risks and gambles, but also like, I don't want them taking anyone who needs like player development, because that's just not going to happen there. Like they're just going to make them evil and worse. So I was fine with Davion Mitchell at 9
and not developable. Yeah, that's really funny.
Yeah, it's basically it's like a sort of it's like a one of those weird like crystal guy theories of like energy conservation in the body, where like the player that the guy is fully formed in there somewhere, and you can't do anything to change it. It's a very like 18th century philosophy.
You've got to take Richie Saunders.
Oh, tell me, I don't know about Richie Saunders.
Well, I'm just saying because he's 24 and he tore his ACL, so you don't got to develop him, and he's
perfect.
He's probably a little risky, but he's nice though. I like Richie.
Where did he go?
BYU.
All right, that's a green flag. Let's go. Okay, looking at your big board, you said this hasn't been updated in a while, but I do want to start at the very top. As I have done my, I'm not going to call it research, as I have read about these various prospects and watched YouTube, I find myself becoming more and more of a Boozer guy as well. But I am concerned that he doesn't jump. That's typically important, and that he doesn't play defense. Like there's all these clips of like 6'1" guys just like shooting right over him. Obviously there are the strengths, but like, why are you so like, you have him in the all-time great tier. It seems like you've had it at number one for several iterations of this. Like, why do you like Boozer so much?
Yeah, he's been one for me since the jump. Right after the Pelicans traded that pick to the Hawks, I immediately made a draft board, which was like, it was half a gimmick, but also just like I was so exuberant about it. I was like, I felt so confident they were going to be bad. And even, I mean, it turned out to be the 8th pick, not the best outcome, but still good. Yeah, Boozer has been number one for me for a while. I think that the concept that I talked about, like applied physicality, strength creation means a lot to me. It means a lot in the playoffs.
Say what applied physicality is.
Applied physicality is like, okay, and this is the concept I described like when I was doing like combine breakdowns. Reed Shepherd has a 40-inch vertical, right? And that's why they were calling him Cocaine Curry, you know, because he was going to take these threes and he was going to be able to dunk on you. But Reed is very slight, right? Like in his frame. Jalen Brunson also had a 38-inch vertical. Both of these guys had 0 half-court dunks last year. But Jalen Brunson is a far superior 2-point scorer because he can apply his physicality in his frame. And though his verticality doesn't show up in his game in terms of like what he does at the rim in terms of dunks, it does show up in the way he's able to hold his driving lines and the way he's able to carve out space and create space. And so that's what I mean by applied physicality. Like guys who are at a certain weight or frame, but they still have some semblance of like twitch or handle or bend, then that gives you a really strong like scoring floor. And that's the craft isn't something that Reed Shepherd had. I still believe in him too, but it's like that 40-inch vertical basically means nothing because he can't get to the paint and create the space that he needs to because he can't bump guys off, all these other things, right? So that's what I mean. And that's something I have like no concern with Cam Boozer. There are guys who have been effective scorers and weren't the most vertical and were pretty interior. Like I think Paul Millsap is like my favorite guy to think of with him. And then over on my site too, like I promise I'm gonna stop plugging myself. But
please. That's why we're here.
We got an official.
Yeah, we're here because we like the site.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but like I did like archetypes because I think that's so interesting to me. Like guys, role distributions, things like that. And some of the guys that show up for Cam Boozer, like in terms of his profile similarity, are guys like James Anderson, Blake Griffin, Zion, and obviously when you talk about Blake Griffin and Zion, the differential is the athleticism and the verticality. But if you took Blake Griffin, shaved off 8 inches of his vert, and then gave him CP3's brain, then you'd get Cam Boozer. And that's, or if you took Julius Randle, you know, like that's the type of game that we're talking about. But it's the value proposition of being that big, that strong, that skilled, that level shooter, but more than anything, his processing, where like, I think this is very articulated best on our podcast, over on my podcast, where one of our guests mentioned that like the superpower, or maybe it might even been me, I don't remember, one of us said the superpower for Zion, Blake, etc., was athleticism. For Boozer, very similar play style, really, but his superpower is his processing. And so like I think that's what transcends, you know, athleticism drop-offs. LeBron's still the smartest player in the game. He's still effective. It's because he can think the game so well, even as his athleticism has declined. So I think Boozer's very resilient. And then, again, we talk about the high school stuff. I think he has more perimeter equity than he was able to show at Duke. And then he's an excellent shooter for his size. Like 250 with his type of touch is pretty anomalous. There's still gaps. Like I think like he doesn't have much of a counter in the middle of the floor. He can be a little bit robotic when he attacks off the catch. He had a pretty high tendency for his shots to get blocked, which isn't great either. But I think like he'll just give you so much as a passer, offensive rebounder at the very least, that like I'm not really as worried about the athleticism.
Yeah, that like the feel thing is just so crazy, and I think like you sort of mentioned this, but one important thing to think about with prospects is like what flaws can you sort of correct with coaching, and like what strengths can you not? And like that feel stuff, like you're not going to teach, you know, anyone else. You're not going to teach like Debonsa to feel the game like Boozer. Like that shit is just like on another level. And with him, that like one of the things I really like, you mentioned this as well, is like this guy is one of the best rebounders I've seen in like several years. And while the like not being able to block shots thing is concerning, like you know, and he's going to get Jokic comparisons for the passing and stuff, but like one reason why Jokic remains a like pretty good defensive player a lot of the time is that he grabs every single rebound near him, and that's like a big part of defense. So I'm with you on really liking him. I don't know if I'd have him number one, but like there's so much to like. I'm going to like watching him probably more than anyone else.
Yeah, what was important is that he measured with a 9-foot standing reach, which like that's like kind of like the baseline to play big in the NBA. I wouldn't play him as a center unless I had like someone who could rotate and protect the rim, but he's big enough and tall enough. Like that's what I was more so. Now, it's like the same thing with like Caleb Wilson. Like Caleb Wilson measured smaller than Boozer, all things considered, but people consider him to be playable at the 5 because he's so athletic, and I think that's definitely worth mentioning. But I think for Boozer, it's like, can he beat out his athleticism concerns with his brain? I'd say more often than not, yes. It's gonna be Gobert all over again in some ways, where it's like a guy who is very like a pariah in some ways, where it's like he becomes the defining line between eye test and that boy nice, and then like the guys. So he's the next generation of that player. But you know,
now that I gotta say, that's a great call. That's an NBR call. Calling your shot that Boozer is gonna be the next lightning rod of discourse is like. You just earned yourself an invite back on the show. But sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was pretty much the point. But I think defensively too is like the defensive rebounding was pretty strong, but it wasn't at like his team. If their bigs were off the floor, like he played with Malik Brown instead of Ngungba, it wasn't as good. So that's some things to consider. Like I don't think he can. I don't think he'll ever anchor a defense, but I think he's positionally strong enough within a team concept that he'll never be a negative. But you know, everyone will have their possessions where they get cooked in isolation. That's why like one of my favorite player quotes was Rudy Gobert he was like, well, let's see after thousands and thousands of possessions. And he's right. You know, over thousands and thousands of possessions is a 4 times defensive player of the year. You know, the loudest clips are going to be when he got turned around by Luka and then he drew a 3 at his face. But such is life.
One thing I wanted to ask, because when you were talking about standing reach, it was something you said. I was listening to an episode of yours, and it kind of blew my mind, which was you said that at the combine, some players will nerf their own standing reach, like reach lower than they think they can to make their vertical higher.
Yep.
That is amazing. That is
wait, that's crazy.
That's genius. Dude, like
that's so cool.
Yeah, I don't remember in what context you were saying that, but I just wanted to flag that as like such a awesome insight.
It was Amari Allen who did that.
Okay,
and some other guys too. Like, but it's something to do with like the way you
just like shrinking.
I think it's you could like drop your shoulders maybe. I don't know. I don't know how they let them get away with it.
Yeah, can I ask a stupid question? Obviously, wingspan, love wingspan, classic stat. I feel like in the last few years, standing reach has become if not as prominent, like certainly way more relatively prominent than it used to be. Why is that a more useful? Is it a more useful metric, and why?
I'd say, I mean, the other one is like wingspan minus height, which is like how much longer is your wingspan than your height, because that allows you to play bigger than your height. Like Colin Murray Burroughs, for example, I mean, he played center for the Raptors. He's 6'6", but he has a massive wingspan. So like I'd say that probably has more precedence, but standing reach is just more so like if you're doing standing dunks, like how much more distance you have to go to get to the rim. And then just like how can you contest shots while remaining on the floor or staying vertical? So like a guy who's, you know, if Boozer was if he had an 8-9 standing reach, for example, then, you know, a lot of those more verticality contests aren't as effective, but you know that those extra couple inches do matter. So I think that's more so why it's gained more traction. So it's just another traction point, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I want to ask about Darren Peterson. I have come all the way around on this guy, and I'm like, he should go number 1. That's Kobe right there. I love Darren Peterson. The fake creatine cover up that they got ESPN to run with is, I guess, mildly concerning. But pretty much every draft guy in the last month has been like, medicals are clean. That's because college basketball doesn't exist. We're like the consensus on all the big boards has been very slowly like Peterson's number one. He's only going to work out in Washington. Like, what do you make of him, and do you see him as someone with higher like bust potential because of the weirdness? Like, where are you at with Peterson?
For me, it wouldn't be the weirdest. Like, I kind of just have a philosophy where like I don't know the guy's medicals. You know, like I'll never. That's why I still have acquaintance so high, because I can only evaluate what I know, and then also candidly, like I tore my ACL a year ago, so acquaintance. That's I'm I feel that I feel him like 100%. So I know what it feels like to like try and get more comfortable with your knee and all that. So I don't know exactly what's going on with him, but I'm not going to ding him for that because I don't know. So that's kind of how I feel about Peterson. I think my thing with Peterson is more so guys who are like very heavily like scoring index have to be elite. And I think what was concerning with him is that he was not a good pairing with Flory Badunka, who was a really good big for Kansas, lob threat. He's a bit undersized, but he's a great vertical threat, great roller, very efficient. But Kansas's offense wasn't as good with Peterson with Badunga as I expected, and Badunga in particular played a lot better off some of their other guards. And that gives me some pause, because if I'm going to be asking Peterson to shoulder this much offense, I'd love for him to have a little bit more, passing influence. And it's not that he can't make the passes. I just think he didn't quite have his burst, so he wasn't able to get deep enough. But it's tough because I don't want to say that I can't tell what his limitations are, if they're physical or if they're like these are actual limitations. And in high school, he played a very on-ball role, and he eventually developed. At some point, if you get in the rock like 60 times a game, you're going to get some assists, right? Not to say he can't pass, but it's like the relative value of how much possessions he's soaking up means that he has to be very effective as a scorer, and he was in a lot of games for Kansas, but it was a bit disruptive to their offense, and some of it is because he was in and out the lineup. And so I found myself thinking like, okay, Brunson's probably like the best example of this, the most recent example, whereas Brunson isn't the best passer. Brunson and SGA both. Not the best passers, but they're just so oppressive as scorers, it doesn't matter. So can Peterson be that? And if he's not, I think Peterson has he can fall back on just being a nuclear shooter, and I play defense. And being a knockdown shooter who plays defense, I mean, Danny Green, elite role player, Shane Battier, elite role player, and Darren Peterson legitimately plays defense. So his floor, I think, is like more solid. I don't know higher than like Boozer or DeBonta, but it's definitely more solid. Like, I think it would take a lot for him to crumble. But of course, with the unknown, we just don't know about the medical. So like, I think from that point, he probably is a little bit more risky. But in terms of like his actual archetype, how he plays, I think he has a very rock solid like translation. And I mean, every team needs shooting, and if you could just play, even if you could just play a little bit of defense, you probably start. And that's how I feel about DP for the most part.
It's interesting as you're saying this. I'm observing this, not knocking it. It's like what you were saying is not talking about the like four biggest stories about him around like he's like walked off the court or whatever. He's like wants the ball, thinks he's a point guard, all this stuff. Like, do you, when you're evaluating that stuff, I think there's a lot of confirmation bias stuff with this, where like it's Ben Simmons. It's a great example where like once Ben Simmons went belly up, everybody was like, well, he quit on his team at LSU and like he was like a low whatever. But like they're these are 19-year-old kids. Like if they're erratic, that's what they should be at 19. But so how do you evaluate the inbound messy information you get about essentially about their personal lives?
Yeah. I think it's just like, how often do you hear it and how many trustworthy sources? Like if I hear something from one person, then I'm kind of like disregarding it. A lot of people are petty, like you got a teammate who doesn't like you, he might just let something fly. And then all of a sudden, so I try not to over index on stuff like that. But, I just saw a clip today where they're, all the big three were there. They're answering questions. They're talking about who's the best defender. And Peterson points to DeBonta, and like, I'm in my head, I'm like, should I ding him for that? Because like, you're the best defender out there, in my opinion. And joking, but also somewhat like I would like to see him believe it is defense, Right. So I think like, things like that, like I'll like somewhat incorporate. But I mean, it's more so about just about how often do you hear it. I think that's the best approach. And like if you hear it a lot, like I think like Nate Ament, for example, like has a very good work ethic from like multiple people. But like to me, I don't know. I feel like to be a top draft prospect, you probably, unless you're like severely gifted athletically, you probably have a strong work ethic. So I don't know how much to rate that. You know what I mean? I'm sure everyone says they have a strong work ethic.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like how many people are the first guy in the gym? It's like
yeah, like yeah, you get those all the time. But it's that's the agents doing their job and what they're telling the story, and the story does matter because you got to understand the person as much as you understand the player. But I just think like as a public evaluator, I don't know a damn about the person, so it's like I'll never try to, as much as I can, I want to separate that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I think also like you got to grade on a curve here and know that like the NBA context is simultaneously like a higher pressure environment, but also like it's a more serious environment. Like people have weird, funky college seasons all the time and then get to the pros and just like put the work in and become normal. Like, I don't think you can really know who a guy is going to be, but I think there's plenty of reason for optimism.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Did you know riders who switch and save with Progressive save nearly $200 per year? That's a whole new pair of riding gloves and more. Quote today, Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $197 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between October 2024 and September 2025. Potential savings will vary.
I want to ask about Debanza, who you have lower than almost anyone I've seen. And I've become increasingly skeptical of him as I've learned things like he only had 12 blocks last season. At no point in his career has he ever... Yeah, he's from Boston. Exactly. Yeah. At no point in his career has he ever been like a rebounder or anything like that. But then I'm like, oh, he's, big DeMar DeRozan as a shot creator, and that you can go either way on how do you feel about that. But like, why are you lower than most on Debanza?
Yeah. So I think to me it was like the relative strength of the class more than anything. Like, and at that point that board was made, like Dalen Swain had a big run. I've been big on Dymar for a minute. I love Kingston Flemings and Caleb Wilson, like all those guys. So some of it's like I just legitimately like them better, but I'm not of the belief that guys just start playing defense in the NBA. And he at the U19 Cup, he wasn't. So I think it's interesting. You want to see guys as many contexts as possible, right? Like, so Debanza was best amateur player probably as a junior. Then his senior year, he kind of just like coasted. And then I was like, okay, well, coming into this collegiate season and coming into the Cup, like I wanted to see more. And I didn't see that. Then Richie Saunders went down, which was like, that kind of like took the floor out their offense. And he had some signature performances with him not there. But I think that Debanza he's similar to Peterson in that where he's going to have to, or he's going to demand like a Jaylen Brown, Cade Cunningham, Shea type of role. And even in my archetypes that I'm going to be releasing, Peterson has a more equal distribution. Boozer has a more equal distribution. And then Debanza is like 80%, he's like 45% offensive engine and then 45% like primary handler. And like that just kind of speaks to like the narrowness of his play style and what that means for the team that you draft him to. And so if he gets that type of usage very early in his career, then maybe he never learns how to balance the defensive load. And I think that now it's just about like how good is he offensively. And I think he's legitimately awesome, but he has holes offensively too, where it's like the 2-point score wasn't as good against competition. He doesn't take as many threes. He doesn't read the game dynamically in a way. Like he's very predetermined. Like he had many instances this season where he would throw a lob without looking at who was there, just because he knew the play was for a lob. And sometimes that can work, but sometimes it doesn't because you're not reading the rotating defender. And so and that's very reminiscent of someone like Shea. Like Shea does that same thing where Shea took 4 games to get adjusted to Indiana's coverages. He took a long time to get adjusted to San Antonio's coverages because he kind of needs to see it first. And that's just like the difference between Guys, you take some guys who are more scoring driven, guys who are more passing driven, whatever it may be. I think I'll probably end up higher than 8, probably. Because I just really do respect what he does within the arc as a scorer, but he has his warts too. You know, like, I mean, he's not as flawless or as polished as I think some people would say. And I do think he still has somewhere to grow offensively, just as he is defensively. But he's certainly probably going to be lower than Boozer for me, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a guy like that who's like, he can't really play the 4, right? I'm thinking about him as a 3 mostly, right? Or do you see him as a power forward? Because I don't think he can guard 4s like that. That to me is the sort of important thing there. But the point I was going to make is basically that, like, yeah, you have a ball dominant wing who's responsible for all this shot creation and shot making, and like that guy's going to average 20 points, you know, every season of his career. But like the question for me is like, how efficient can that really be? And he's so big and is like athletic enough that I think he's going to be able to get shots on basically anyone. But like, is the swing skill his 3-point shooting, or is it just like how often he can like, because he got fouled a lot. It's like, is he going to continue to get fouled in the league? Like, what do you think is like the most, the thing that will induce the biggest variance in his outcome?
His whistle is special. Like
Boston.
He's got a special whistle. Like, I mean, high school, World Cup. He has real craft drawing fouls. He already has mastered all the mannerisms. I'm sure he's gonna like infuriate fans for half a decade or whatever. I think it's more like the shot profile, just because he might legitimately be that level 2-point scorer, and he probably will be just because of what he can do at the rim and how he can elevate over guys. But it just makes it a lot easier for him if he can take more of those pull-up threes, because then you can justify like all the pick and roll usage, things like that, and he won't have to embrace a more like variance heavy play style. Because if you think about it this way, right? The deeper you get into the paint, the higher the turnover value chance gets. So if you're constantly probing in the paint,
turnover value chance. Say more about that.
Or I probably didn't say that well, but like the deeper your closer your scoring profile is to the basket, the higher of a chance you turn the ball over, just because the floor gets more condensed.
Yep.
Right. So it's like, for a guy like him, you can't, and he had a pretty decent like turnover influence at BYU, but like they're kind of decent, but like not what you would expect for how much he has the ball in his hands. And like guys who do that, who aren't going to give you a ton of passing volume, can't be turning the ball over. But because he got so deep at times, then it caused him issues. So like if you can trade off some of those possessions with pull-up threes, then you're not turning the ball over. And that's more so what I mean, where it's like he'll help himself out because defenses will have to come up to the level of the screen and they can get past him, but also just like not turn the ball over as much because he's not getting as deep, not getting himself in trouble. That's really the rationale behind why he should take more threes.
I'm hearing, Paolo Banchero in one ear and Jason Tatum in the other. What all of this is coming to. Should we talk about the Hardwood Collective to get us out of here?
For sure.
Before we do, I do want to ask about, I know you're a Flemings guy, but like the rough consensus is there's the big four with Caleb Wilson and then like Wagler, Acuff, Mikal Brown, Flemings, in some rough order, which I don't think that's how the draft is actually going to go, because I'm with you that someone's going to be like, we got to take Ademara. Like that guy's so good. But you don't, your board does not have it this way. And I've seen various people be variously high on like all of these guys at different times. Like the Clippers at 5, I've seen them taking Wagler a lot, like probably not Acuff, but basically everyone else has been up there. Do you see them as a cohort, and why do you like Flemings sort of the most?
So to me, this guard class is not as transformative as people have built it, but I do think I like the options in the late first round as much as I do, like from a value perspective, as I was if I was taking the guards like top 10. And that's what, man, I wish I had more time in the day, because I would have done this video, but like people are misconstruing why Brunson worked as a small guard. It's not that he's a small guard who's good. It's that he went in the second round, so his contract was cheaper. And then he got traded from the Mavs. And then when the Knicks acquired him in free agency, he wasn't eligible for the massive contract boost because he was traded from his original team. So it's like the contract value that you put into the small guard, they got him for cheaper, which is why they got Mikal Bridges and OJ Anunoby. And then they were able to build this team that specifically insulated him because he was on a cheaper contract. So it's like if you're going to get Darius Acuff for Jalen Brunson, you're missing the point of what made Jalen Brunson. And we're not even talking about the player evaluation, because Brunson himself's an anomaly. Like, his team, not a strong defender by any means. He's not getting steals, not getting blocks, not rebounding. But all his teams at Villanova were top 30 in defense because Brunson is fat in a good way. Because Brunson has mass. Brunson can take up space. He can hold his line. And so it's like, Brunson's a great team defender. He understands schemes, but he's legitimately big enough to not be bullied. Right. And like, it matters that he's a little bit tubby. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's no guard. If there's a guard that could be a Brunson type of player who like performed well in team context, wasn't a strong defender individually, but showed a ton of usage and could potentially blossom into, being a very complimentary guard and then maybe becoming like more of a lead guard. I'm throwing a lot at myself, but one of my guys on the Hardwood Collective, he just did a piece about Bennett Sturts. And Bennett Sturts is a guy who profiles very similarly to Jalen Brunson. Bruce Thornton, another guy in the second round, profiles very similar to Jalen Brunson, great 2-point scorer, bigger guard. Like, Bruce Thornton out of Ohio State has a higher BMI than DeMarcus Cousins when he came into the league. Bruce Thornton's BMI is like 32. But he shot 60% for two. And that's why. Like, he's big. So it's like, those are like more of the traits that you would look for, in my opinion, when you're looking for a guard to approximate Brunson. But like, the guards in this class who are going to go in the lottery, you have to kind of just accept that they're going to take a lot of time to get good. Like, Darius Garland was the worst player in the league for 3 years. Keontae George, worst player in the league for 2 years, and probably is still one of the worst players. His shots just started going in, but he still got to figure out the turnovers in the defense. So it's like, you make this bet on like, okay, they're not going to be good now. They're going to be good second or third contract. And so for me, I would prefer for the Hawks to take Flemings, because Flemings is, in my opinion, one of the best processors and playmakers that we've seen as of late. And he played very good in a strong defensive context at Houston. His playmaking was like truly transformative for the guys on the floor. Like, that's all, again, in that article that we have up on the Hardwood Collective. Like, we broke down everything about his game. So I won't relitigate everything, but to me, Flemings is the most like scheme agnostic, team agnostic guy. And I think that, again, like, I very much so value Feel, and he's the premier example in the class at the guard position. And it's not to say that Michael or Acuff or Wagler are bad players, or that I don't like them per se, but like, for Michael, it's like the turnovers and the overall volatility. Like, I'm kind of scared of guys who introduce a lot of volatility, a lot of variance, and that's his whole game. Is like, he's gonna try some wicked passes. It's gonna look really cool when it works, but like, most of the time he's gonna hit someone in the crowd, or he's gonna airball a three. And there's parts of that I like. I love the risk taking, but the delivery and the risk to reward ratio wasn't there. And then like I mentioned how he was really poor from two in high school. That persisted in college. And so that's another thing. And then Acuff is like kind of Teflon in terms of what he put up in the box score. But I think like, he's legitimately like apathetic defensively. Did not care.
He's one of the worst defenders.
I think you mean he has crazy aura. I think that's.
I mean, I can't deny the aura is there. Like, the aura is definitely there. But that can only get you so far. You know what I mean? Like, when, in the NBA too, where they're going to put him in action time and time again. It helps that his wingspan is big, but he's not like someone that I think is going to. I'd rather like take my chances like in the 20s with like Buko Corey or LeBaron Philon, Bennett Sturts, Malik Thomas, his teammate, Arkansas. I like those guards more relative to the value that you could get at that point in the draft. But I would fully expect like,
I'm sure the Kings will listen to you.
The Nets and the Kings, yeah, they'll probably if they heard this, they're gonna be like, yeah, no. But but again, everyone has their different philosophies. It doesn't make mine right, doesn't make theirs wrong. But you can only judge it by the way you articulate it.
Yep. All right. Well, let's end here with the Hardwood Collective. So the other, in addition to your liking what you were doing as a draft analyst, you also are putting together this website called the Hardwood Collective that appears to be kind of in the Defector spirit of Raider supported, like a bunch of different writers and thinkers coming together to make a thing. That's always like, to me, that's always a very cool, like a North Star, something that I want more people to be doing. How did you come to decide to want to do something like this? Because you're spearheading it, it's my understanding. Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's like, it's very much so in line with how I feel about data. Like, I think big on equitable access. I'm big on like thorough and nuanced content. And I want nothing more than produce that and to get around people who produce that so I can continue to, learn more. And so that's where the idea came from. And then just like, I know that some guys have done some one-off consulting projects, so it made sense to like also fold it into a consulting arm where we can like officially say, hey, like these are things we've done for teams in the past. Let us try and solve X problem for you with our understanding of data. And so that could be, maybe we're implementing a different way to, use your existing data, or we're devising a different way for you to sort of like track your practices. So like I have a passion too for like play call tracking. So like that's what I did for the Hawks this season. I tracked all their plays and I put it in the Google sheet, and it was like 7,000 rows. And even though I did that, I still had people in my comments saying I don't watch the games. And I was like,
that's how you know you made it.
Right. Like the amount of times people tell me to watch the games in a video, I'm just like, yo, like I really just want to link the spreadsheet and just be like, look. but then it's like, I'm setting up the joke for myself because it's a spreadsheet. But
right.
Yeah, so like that's one of the things I want to expand as well, where it's like adding depth to like play call tracking in a way that I don't think exists at a collegiate level. So there's like a lot of different one-off projects I want to funnel through it, but I've always been big on like independent media, staying away from big gambling, things like that. Like, I mean, I get messages from those types of companies, and like that's something that I'm very adamantly against. So like that's something that I felt like didn't align with Substack. For example, Substack had an integration with Polymarket, and also Substack didn't have the customizability I wanted like for the site. So like I mentioned, I want to fold the fifth factor, which is the stats engine, into the articles, and that's what I've done. Is like the fifth factor tables like render and are dynamically interactive within the articles, and my writers and the people that I brought in that collaborate with me, they can query directly within as they write the article to support their evidence, and then users can click on that and go directly to the player profile. And like that's how I want it to be a basketball platform, like for good faith discussion, but I also want it to like be what I would want when I start writing articles, or when I write articles too. So that's kind of like the whole genesis of the idea, and then it fit in well with like the mission of the fifth factor, which is, just making good, interesting stuff, good analysis, and hopefully also platforming people who deserve it. Because I think, I've been blessed to grow over the last couple months, and it doesn't really mean anything to me if like I'm the only one growing, when I know there are people who also deserve spotlight. So that's why I'm hoping that, we all get some sort of stimulus check, off the collective, and then, we all end up getting to where we want to be. So that's also like the fact that, the homage to the Stepien too. The Stepien I was too young to ever experience it. So I don't really feel like there's anything like it. There's still some guys who do great work, like Switch Theory, for example. Like I love what they do. But we wanted the argument that, right, like accentuate it, add a different voice, and yeah.
No, it's awesome. I mean, there's so much good stuff on there. I was reading it was Jason's like really long draft philosophy thing today. And I was just thinking like, I'm so glad something like this exists out there. It's just like so thorough. So yeah, you guys are doing great stuff over there.
Appreciate you. One thing on that, I was dying at this is also was just like, I was poking around that article too. And this is when I knew the Hardwood Collective was good for NBR. There's a line in there. In real life, Black Swan events like 9/11 and Pearl Harbor created reactive responses, example, the Patriot Act, etc., that were disproportionate to the odds of the same or similar swan recurring, given all of their external factors. Obviously, on a much smaller scale, the same dynamic appears in basketball prospect analysis. And then you go on to Jason goes on to talk about Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Kevin Durant, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I absolutely love that. And then the other one I really liked was kind of a long form analysis about how Trace Jackson Davis might be good, and that what was throwing him off the scent or throwing everybody off the scent was that he was playing with Buddy Hield all the time, which just stinks. That was as a member of who would watch Buddy Hield come on my freaking lineup in the 8 minutes left in the second quarter, and just like my vision would start shaking. I think you're absolutely right that Buddy Hield was doing something crazy. And now you have him as a Hawk, so welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's one thing the three of us have in common. That's great.
Yeah. We all love Buddy Hield.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, David. This was great. I hope you enjoy the draft tomorrow. I know I'm going to watch. It's going to be great. Where can people find you? Where should they check you out?
Yeah, man. Again, thank you all for having me. DD for 3 all platforms. I think except Instagram, like 3D for 3 NBA. And then, over on the hardwoodcollective.com and the defifthfactor.io, which will have the updated stats and the quiz that I'll be dropping shortly.
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.